Alright, so there was a Pokemon Direct this Thursday announcing, among other things, a DLC package for Pokemon Sword and Shield called Isle of Armor and Crown Tundra. It's $30 for the pair of them to unlock it on one of your copies. And I see a lot of people figuratively thanking Game Freak from the bottom of their hearts for not doing something scummier, and that bothers me. Just in case you missed my older takes on Sword and Shield real quick, I'm not a fan, I didn't buy it, I tried it out with a friend who did, and I'm still not a fan. So, the DLC. By the way, in the background you can see me play Pokemon Showdown, just Gen 7 Random Battles, because I like those better than Gen 8. So, the DLC. I see people getting on their knees and thanking Game Freak for not making a third full-priced game like Ultra Sun and Moon, and instead using the paid DLC model to add content instead, and just defending that, which I have a huge issue with, because you're thanking them for not doing an ultra shitty thing, and forgetting that the thing they're doing could also be really shitty. Of course, there's no way to know exactly how much content you're getting for $30, but as far as I can tell, it's basically 2 more wild areas and some new characters and storyline content. If I had to guess, I would say you're getting about 10 hours worth of gameplay out of it. Maybe, I'm very bad at guessing these, but I really doubt it's worth the price of half a Switch game, or roughly the price of a full 3DS game back in the day. So regardless of how many hours the expansion is worth, I think you could make a solid argument that this DLC should have just been in the main game. Because Pokemon Sword and Shield offer almost no explorable areas or dungeons, whereas every other Pokemon game thus far, and honestly any kind of RPG, offers tons and tons of them. It really feels like they just didn't manage to finish these parts of the game and decided to sell them separately, instead of actually releasing a finished game. There's no way to know that for sure, but considering it must have been in development for a while now before releasing the trailer and the game is only a couple months old, I think they had to make the conscious decision at one point to leave these 2 parts out of the main game, and then decided to sell them separately. Now, real quick, I'm not actually against DLC in itself, adding content through DLC. I think it can work. I think at its best the DLC can be a great way for developers to enrich a complete game post-release, but note how I said complete game. But Sword and Shield are just so unfinished and rough around the edges that I think it falls on the other end of the spectrum of this Mona Lisa DLC meme/analogy that I love to use for this. Basically, they're selling an incomplete game and then they're packaging the stuff that it didn't complete as a new thing. I think it's a very unhealthy and bad practice. It gives them incentive to hold back content from a main game, a game that's already $60, and then sell it separately. And then they sell it to you as if they're doing you a favor by doing that, and you gotta pay extra for it. Is it as bad as releasing Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon? Who cares? Maybe not. I thought Ultra Sun and Moon were pretty shitty too, but how does that excuse this instead? Oh, by the way, shoutouts to people who held out on Sword and Shield waiting for Sharp Sword and Strong Shield or whatever, and hoping they would be able to buy a more complete version of it later. Because they now have to pay $60 for the base game, and then $30 additional for the DLC to complete it, and then if you want the online interactivity, you gotta pay $20 for Nintendo Online. That's great, right? And then of course that doesn't include whatever they're gonna charge for Pokemon Home whenever they're gonna release information about that. And that's also not including any future expansions that you might want to buy as well to make the complete expansion even more complete. Okay, so you might say, what about these counter arguments that totally address each of my arguments and the underlying principles? The number one that people love to use is, if you don't like it, don't buy it. Well, shit, I'm not buying it. I haven't bought a Pokemon game in ages, but I want to. I would love to buy a Pokemon game that's not overpriced and rushed. Hell, I will gladly pay $30 extra for DLC if I think it's good enough to add to the complete game. But I haven't seen those things. I would have loved them if they were there. I would have loved to support this franchise and play these games, but I can't justify it because, for what I can see, everything I can see is pretty shitty. And these kind of criticisms, believe it or not, they come from a good place. The desire for a good Pokemon game, but they're not giving me any. If you're one of those people telling others that they're not real Pokemon fans because they don't like Sword and Shield, then please just get off your high horse and stop gatekeeping a video game. I'm actually okay with people liking Sword and Shield. I really disagree, and a tiny part of me wishes that people were willing to hold Game Freak and Pokemon to a higher standard so that they would be forced to improve, but you have all the right to enjoy these games and the DLC, and I will never tell you to stop. You do you. Another argument that people love to use is saying, but they added 200 old Pokemon back for free. You don't even have to buy the DLC. I will admit, having 200 of them back is better than not having them back, but what would have been even better if they hadn't been cut to begin with. Now, I know that might sound really whiny, but to me this argument is equivalent to you stealing $400 of mine and then insisting that I'm grateful when you give me 200 back. And while you don't have to pay for the data to be patched into your game through an update, you still need someone who is paying for a way to obtain these Pokemon, either through Pokemon Home or this DLC, neither of which is out yet, by the way, so in the meantime you still don't have your old Pokemon. And yes, that is still a big deal because they made up a bunch of excuses as to why it was necessary, and they were outright lies. It was not for competitive balance, especially not in 1v1 gaming, battling, whatever. It was not for extremely high quality animations, because there aren't any, and it was most definitely not for remaking models. And then, of course, there's also this argument. Nobody batted an eye when this previous extra version came around, you know, Emerald, Platinum, Black and White 2. Now, here's my flaming hot take for you. Pokemon versions have always been a bit of a ripoff. It was cute in Gen 1 maybe, because the idea was that people would get together and trade their red and blue version exclusives using a link cable. It was a way to make people interact a bit. There was no online or anything, and the Game Boy didn't have the capability to link up with anything other than like with a silly cable. It would have been nice if they included the cable with the thing, but whatever. That thing was a one-time purchase and then you owned it. And then Yellow came by. It's a bit of a gimmick. It's a game based on the anime and Ash's Pikachu. It's pretty damn silly, and I probably wouldn't buy it today. I will gladly admit that. But this trend has kept going, and we're now 8 generations in, and they have released the same game at least twice and sometimes 4 times per generation. And that's not even counting like actual remakes. Those are okay. But it's insane. No other game company would get away with releasing a game that's 90% the same so many times, but for some reason, because Game Freak always does it, there's much less complaining about it. I feel like people have only kind of woken up to this because of all the other Sword and Shield controversy, and it's mostly the people who are already annoyed with Game Freak who are willing to criticize this. But when you think about it, the only time that there was ever a good reason to release multiple versions like this was all the way back before online. And even when it comes to like Crystal and Emerald, I don't really like this practice of release a game and then release a slightly improved game that reuses 90% of everything like a year after. Now, these things have been pretty much normalized because Pokemon does it every time, so a lot of people feel okay defending it with the fact that it's always been that way. But just because it's always been that way doesn't mean it was always an okay thing. It just means they're only getting called out on it now for whatever reason. But Pokemon fans are generally just very loyal people. I am very loyal to Pokemon in a way because I still love the franchise with all my heart despite everything that's been happening to it. But can we please get some higher standards, please? I get that, like, for Game Freak, right now, it honestly doesn't make any sense to improve anything because it's been proven that people will buy the products anyway. So I understand their point of view of not feeling like doing it, because if you can make the same money while, you know, still putting out rushed product, then really why bother improving? Doesn't mean that I am okay with it. Like, I don't want to really like bring up ethics or morals into this, but I feel like if they really had a passion for the franchise and if they really wanted it to be the best they could be, well, at the cost of a little bit of profit, they could. I think they could do a lot better with the money they're making. I mean, this is the most profitable franchise of all, so I don't know why they wouldn't. But for some reason, they decided they'd rather maximize their profits and minimize the efforts. And, you know, that's their choice to do. And if they're not being punished for it, then why not keep doing it? And the answer to that is basically morality. Game morality. Yeah, we've gone there. But yeah, and then from the consumer side, like, I don't want to blame consumers. I don't want to blame, you know, Pokemon players, Pokemon fans for buying into it because, you know, the fear of missing out is a really huge thing. And I can understand them not wanting to miss out on the newest Pokemon game. But at the same time, I feel like every single generation is going to get worse if you're going to keep being okay with that. And I think that's something to think about. But I fully understand people who still want to buy the games, don't get me wrong. But yeah, the latest DLC, it is not the gift, the second coming of Jesus or sliced bread or whatever. It's not that great. It's just slightly less scummy than another new version. And I don't think we should be okay with slightly less scummy. I think we could do a lot better. But at this point, Game Freak has no good reason to improve their products because they're still selling and they're okay with the games they're putting out, clearly. And the people who are buying them, they're also okay with it because they feel like it's worth spending their money on, and that's their decision to make in the end. But yeah, those are my thoughts on the DLC. I recorded a bunch of background footage for this apparently, so enjoy the rest of those random battles, I guess, and I'll see you for another video next time. Peace. Oh, and by the rest of the random battles, I mean watch someone get bodied by a Swanna.